Hello, everyone. My name is Jakash Kapin, and this is In Conversation, our series of live interviews. First of all, as always, this is a warm invitation to join the WELL Global Vocal Improvisation Network at thewellvocal.com, where you can become a member for free through a simple form. You can add your events to a global map, check our resources page, and also check the new Get Involved page where you can find out how to maybe collaborate with us on a post on social media, maybe co-write a blog post, or maybe even something else that we even haven't thought about yet. For today, I'm very excited to talk to Guillermo Rosenthaler. He's my very dear friend, collaborator, teacher, and more, to be honest. So without further ado, let's see if he's ready to join. And as usual, with these things sometimes taking time, we just get to sing a little bit. Feel free to solo or join me in any other way.
Ah,
Hello.
hello, we did it. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you.
You made it. Welcome to
Yeah.
In Conversation. How are you doing in this moment where you are? Tell us a little bit about your day or anything like that.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm back in London. This is home. Uh, I'm fresh from a really beautiful week in Italy at the Festival Corpin Festa in Rovereto, organized by Colectivo Rosario and Charles Russell. I coincided with some beautiful facilitators from Brazil and Italy. And I'm still recovering from lots of music, lots of hugs, lots of warmth.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I just emerged from the forest from like a week-long retreat. So I'm kind of back home, but not really, but very happy to be here. First of all, for full disclosure, we are really good friends. We collaborate a lot. You're probably the person that I talk to most about improvisation. So this is kind of, our usual space, but in a different way, on a different platform. And our theme is Singing Village, but let's see where our conversation takes us.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how much we open up spaces when we talk together. But what feels different here is that it's being spread out and hopefully it's gonna reach more people.
Yes, exactly. So maybe before giving us a bit of a history of you as a facilitator, um, I'm kind of interested as someone who is very experienced in bringing very diverse groups of people together. Right now, when you're in a space and the people have not, sung with before, they're kind of meeting for the first time. At this stage of your, developing pedagogy, what are you most curious about, or what do you tend to actually focus on? It might be different things, but what comes to mind, as a kind of a focal point or curiosity right now when you walk in this room, of strangers, quote unquote, at the beginning?
Um, well, who are these people and what they have to bring to the collective, each one of them from their own unique life experience? And how can I make an invitation which is open enough so that they can all come together and feel that they join something that is meaningful and expansive, and that they can get over themselves and the preoccupation about themselves and begin to enjoy what's occurring between us in that moment. That's my main joy and my main challenge. And I've changed a lot uh, in two directions. The first one is that I feel less preoccupied about where they are coming from. I'm more curious about what they bring in that moment, which is a longer theme. We can talk about it if we discuss then bringing people of different uh, levels and walks of life together. But then also there's another aspect, which is I don't feel I need to explain myself or to apologize or to make lots of clauses. This is going to be like this is going to be like that. But rather, okay, let's jump into something very adventurous and creative and see how each person responds.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of jumping in, I want to give you maybe a question and a creative, task about what do you actually want to share about, your musical journey, because you've had such a rich experience of where you lived, how you, musically exchange. But as you said, sometimes it's a really good question to ask, what do we share and why, and what doesn't need to be shared. So at this stage, if maybe for people that don't know you, what would you bring as some main points that led you to vocal improvisation, or anything that you feel like it's good for people to know before we delve into, your approach to vocal improvisation pedagogy?
Hmm. Yes. So I came to vocal improvisation through a series of accidents in different ways. So one accident was I wanted to be a jazz musician and I couldn't play jazz guitar well enough. So I thought, oh, it's so easy to sing. What I hear, I'm going to become a jazz singer. Little did I know. So that was the first happy accident I had. The second happy accident was probably coming to England and ending studying ethnomusicology at university and doing a master's and beginning to, I suppose, to channel my curiosity into the music of the world and how it was made and what I found so compelling listening to music from very diverse cultures. What is it that really touched me? There was something about the aliveness of it and some mix of elements and how it occurred in the context of life and some, I don't know what to call it, perfect imperfection, something that was not what I was taught to do in my music education, but that was a lot more raw and connected with the sharing of feelings. So that was the second accident. And then the third accident, and probably the most significant, was to arrive in Sheffield back in 2000 and to be put in front of a group where there were people with uh, psychological difficulties, people who were immigrants and refugees and had language difficulties and perhaps trauma and difficult stories that had brought them to England, uh, people who were physically challenged in different ways. And I was in front of this room and we had to do something together and we ended up improvising. And that was a very rough and tumble way to start becoming creative in how can I support these people who are so different and this could be so rich, but I need to find a way to bring them together. And it's not a repertoire, it's not something that I like or that I wrote or that they know. It needs to be something else. So that's how I arrived into improvisation as a facilitator, and that's how I discovered how how cool it could be as a tool to bring people together.
Mm. Yeah, and getting to the title of the Singing Village, it's not an easy question to put these concepts into words. I mean, by now we have spent how many years even just talking about it, in various
Yeah.
ways, singing about it and being with it. But maybe it would be good to give you this challenge of a little, not a pitch, but your current summary and your current parts that are most resonating to share.
So, coming back to what I've just shared about my own journey to begin from jazz, becoming a jazz singer, then trying to uh, put that aside and find something more authentic and more expressive as a human being, and then listening to music of the world, and then working with this group of people in England, groups, were more than one, that were very challenging in different ways. It really put me in touch with how important it is for me, who was an able and talented musical child, to put that aside and to allow for the understanding that each human being has the capacity and the right to make music with others. Musicality is something really precious and that can be developed but cannot be taught, doesn't need to be taught because it's inside each one of us, the capacity to respond to a rhythm, to respond to a note, to respond to a feeling, to empathize with someone else in a musical way and be with them without having to say anything. So the possibility of music being a way without or beyond words for one human to say hello to another human, or for a group of humans to say hello to someone who is new in that community. I just found so many times this experience of people very rapidly dropping into a space of connection and deep understanding of each other without having to explain themselves. And so when I began thinking of a pedagogy, because for 10 years I did what I did without thinking, when I started putting on my thinking hat and saying, okay, what is this that I'm creating? What is this that I'm inviting? I realized that one of the main starting points for me was to reimagine how it would have been for humans to sing together before music was a thing, before music was taught, before there was a difference between a professional musician, an amateur musician, and somebody who was deemed non-musical. In other words, there was a point in the history of humanity where there was a hierarchy. And probably before that point, I imagine that there were people with different skills, but nobody dictated how to do things. And people could just join with what they had. So this reimagining I found very helpful for myself to be open-minded and open-hearted about the people who brought different skills than the ones I had. But also I found that it liberated people from a lot of stories and thoughts, both the people who were from the cannot sing, mustn't sing, was told not to sing camp, and the people who were perhaps very talented and experienced and had a lot of self-pressure. It liberated everyone to come together in one creative space in the middle. And that's where the singing village came. This metaphor, this reimagining, not a romanticizing of how beautiful it was to be the prehistoric free spirit, but more of how would it be for a community of people to be together and to express feelings in community with sound, rhythm, and melody? How would it be for someone to be having a walk in a riverside, listen to a bird song and feeling compelled to respond to that bird song with their voice? How would it have been for someone else to hear that voice and to feel inside themselves the desire to join that song? This is really what fascinates me.
Hmm. And in some ways, we can describe it as something that comes before modernity, right? So maybe we, in this modern world, like in our current, let's say, us being right now in Europe or any kind of context where music and singing, especially and communal singing, is separated from daily life. But this point that you described when it got detached comes at very diverse points. In some cultures, it's not detached; it's continuous for the whole of right history, and then in different parts of the world it happened in different times. So I almost wonder if we can dig into where you're from originally, from I mean where you grew up in Argentina, because we didn't mention that pre
Yeah.
2000s, and maybe what do you think was the impact of where you grew up on this way of understanding music? Do you feel like there's a connection there? And
Hmm.
yeah, how
Ooh,
do you then within this
that's
context
that's a
actually
great question.
yeah.
Okay, I like to go back to what you were saying before when you brought the word modernity and just say, for me, if I look at the timeline of humanity, and I even don't have the accurate figure of how many thousands of years since humans appeared on Earth or since they found the first bone flute or whatever, this feeling that the timeline was very long before history started being documented. And I'm really interested in that, this idea that each mediation that documented things made things a bit more complex and more exclusive. But especially what modernity brought was the change between oral tradition and the written word. And then from then on, it started cascading very quickly to recording, videoing, and each time what comes spontaneously as a human expression is captured in a medium, there's more chance for comparison. Something in the freshness of how things move and evolve is lost. And I feel it's important to speak about this because the separation between improvisation and non-improvisational is something quite new as a notion.
Yeah, and even
Because
the duality, improvisation, composition is a Western notion. So
yeah,
it's
because
not
what
improvised.
where I really feel is that for so long things were made up, and if they traveled and were remembered, it was because they stuck in the collective consciousness and they were passed from a person to another person in a really organic way. So music was very much embedded in this fabric of life.
Yeah, or for instance, if you're working together, the song that stick was the one that was most suited for that activity, right? That made the activity faster, or that made even you surviving that activity based on your circumstance, the work or any other life situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also the way that things were preserved was dynamic because we wouldn't know how they were sung 100 years ago. We could just guess. So things kept changing in a certain way. There was always an element of improvisation and agency, even in the material that we now see as frozen. And this brings me to your question of Argentina. Uh, I grew up there. I studied music there. I was very interested in many genres of music, but very much in Argentinian folklore. And my experience of studying it was very different from my experience of traveling and living it in an evening, guitar and voice by the fireplace or on top of a mountain where a group of people were celebrating the carnival. So the freshness of people celebrating and singing in full voice was very different from how I was taught to think about it, the rhythms, the scales, the shape of the songs. There was a strictness studying it that didn't match the vibration of hanging out with people and seeing these events where people were singing, dancing, sometimes even, I don't know, drumming and throwing flour across the room, and some really beautiful experiences I had in different parts of Argentina. So I think that was very transformative for me and it informed a lot.
Hmm. And we all have these personal histories in terms of the music that we listened to, the music that we were exposed to, the music that we researched. So for you, if you think right now, when you go into a space and improvise with the voice, where are you drawing from? Is it describable in any useful,
Mm,
sense? Where does the music
okay.
for you?
Oof. So there's what I would call, and I think there's an academic that called this a version of this, the living library of my lived life. So there's the music I was exposed to as a child, the was I was drawn to because of my emotional, spiritual impulse. And I remember my mother saying, "Oh, he heard this song from a French film and he cried when he was one and a half," or yeah, Mozart made him happy, but Chopin made him tearful, and things like that. So there was, in my childhood, there was classical and jazz and Latin American music. And then I made my own choices from Latin American pop music to Brazilian music and more jazz. But then traveling is what made me discover more things. And I never thought very much about my identity and my ancestry. Traveling in Argentina, I felt familiar with the language, alien with the land in the sense that I was born in the city,
Mhm.
but alien on another level. And it's not just because ethnically I don't have Latin American genes in me, but it's something I understood when I came to Europe that a big part of my soul is European, and all my ancestry is from Eastern Europe. And somehow that is very alive in me. And a lot of people had told me they hear it in my voice. Oh, sound Ukrainian, you sound Jewish, you sound Polish. So I have begun to embrace that because it's in my blood and it's in my genes and it might show in different ways. Uh, and it's still a zone of conflict in the sense of uh, I feel at the moment I don't belong fully in Europe and I'm an immigrant, and I don't belong fully in Argentina either because I'm an immigrant. So it's a zone of conflict, but at the same time, it's a zone of joy and including all the parts of me.
Yeah, and that's right, the shared human experience of like migration. However you take it, there is a part of it that is migratory in most of us, and it allows us for a different perspective, right? The shift then allows you to see things or hear them from a different side.
Absolutely. And then there's another layer, which is since I came to the UK for different reasons, I had the chance to listen, learn, be exposed to, and study to a certain degree, to a very humble degree, certain traditions. So Indian classical music, I dip my toes in, and Arabic classical music, I dipped my toes in, and African music, I dipped my toes and a bit more in. And then I got to find some Latin American music that I didn't know from traditions that I hadn't been drawn to. So everything that I found is there, and I feel I can respect it and be in dialogue with it when I sing without taking from it, but more from a place of how much I love listening to it and I have loved connecting with those styles of music. So at the moment, I don't feel lighthearted about singing with sounds that reminisce different traditions. I feel there's an importance in recognizing where they came from. But on the other hand, I'm not precious about naming those things when I'm singing. They just
Mhm.
occur and they are part of what I hear inside. And it's like my fascination for different languages and for speaking different languages and to flow between them.
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of the elements, maybe I can say, of the Singing Village spontaneous collective song as a way of, creating music that might be quite different to what, our listeners might understand is vocal improvisation. So maybe there's some people that are listening that are more, doing free improvisation, which might be very different to some people who are just working with, within a genre and improvising something that is genre based. So then getting to the spontaneous collective song as an idea, and maybe even my fascination with how it kind of removes some structures, so of hierarchy, of identity even, and where does it lead us, maybe,
Um,
in
oof.
your...
That's a really big question. I began to realize that I had problems with the word improvisation or improvisation. I don't even know how to say it properly. Uh, on many levels. So for people who are outside of music, when you say you do improvised music, they think that there's something a bit kind of, I don't really care about this. There's a carelessness. Oh, it's improvised. It's not rehearsed. It's not prepared. It's not composed. So what is it? It's kind of, the word improvised has a connotation of something that hasn't been carefully crafted. This is for people who are non musicians. Like if I go to, I don't know, to offer a workshop in a corporate environment and I say I do improvised music, they're like, hold on, that doesn't sound very fun or very thought. So that's the first thing about the word improvisation. But then also coming from trying to learn the language of jazz improvisation, uh, I loved it so much. And on the other hand, I found it so limiting and it took me to so much judgment and sense of not being enough as I am. And then I met so many people who had a similar experience, and I accompanied them as a singing teacher, as a voice person, to change their mind about that. And then when I came into the world of vocal improvisation, which is the people who really like it, like creating things for their voice, who use the terminology, still I found that a lot of people either related it with jazz or with free improvisation, and that came with an idea of what the music sounded like, an idea that was quite limiting about the palette of what was possible. So there was a certain type of voice and a certain type of music that came and felt a bit recurrent to me. I could hear it and it sounded like vocal improvisation. Uh, so part of this inquiry about transculturality and ancestrality was like, okay, what do humans sound like when you invite them to do something fresh and spontaneous and you don't call it vocal improvisation? So I still use the term sometimes, but I'm interested in spontaneous singing because something feels rounder and older. And to me, it feels more like finding an old pebble in the beach that has been tumbled and it went under the waves and it traveled from here to there and it became soft and rounded because of all its history. And vocal improvisation feels more like a modern creation and a term that came after modernity to name something that is not fixed and composed and without an author. So um, I'm leaning towards spontaneous singing because it feels softer and more inviting.
Yes, and also spontaneous collective song to me is saying that all of these, traditions of singing. I don't know. The last example that I was engaged with passing through Switzerland was yodeling. How they start as improvised, and only then they're fixed. And maybe in the current state, we don't really recognize the improvised or spontaneous part, source, beginning, initiation of them, and only know them as fixed, which is great. But to know both, it's a very different relationship to that practice and what it means.
Absolutely, and I am starting to feel that anything that we see as fixed was originally spontaneously created by someone, or even not by one person, but more like in the way a recipe might be created with different people putting different ingredients, which brings me back to this thing about levels and mixing people of different levels. So the village as a metaphor has another possibility, which is the coexistence of people who are very capable vocally and bring the sound, their vibration, with people who might be very capable musically because they have a special sense of rhythm or a creativity with melodies, even though they might not have a very resonant voice, with people who are good movers, with people who are uh, more theatrical, with people who are more experienced and have a quieter presence, with people who are perhaps more shy and say less, but bring their contemplative element. So, in this alchemy of people coming together, something is richer. And when I hear uh, music, I'm beginning to ask myself, has this come from the mind of one person or from the collective cooking of people with different skills that kept marinating this in different directions after someone started it?
So this coexistence also reminds me of what I wanted to maybe ask before, which is what then happens to these ideas of, hierarchy or power or, within these multiplicities of movement and song and the collective emergence of anyone being able to propose, what happens to these notions that we might have otherwise very present in daily lives? What happens to them basically when we
I
enter
mean,
into
that's a large question, but the first response that comes to me is if if I can find a way as somebody who facilitates these processes to be more horizontal and the participants can also begin to realize that they are working with me and with each other on the same level, and that if somebody who has more apparently more experience in the musical side is open, they can receive from other people. it really helps to soften some of these power dynamics, which are so strong now. And it helped us to realize that we were given them by quite recently by forms of domination in history that valued certain aspects of humanity more than others. So they valued, for example, uh, a form of uh, understanding of music and intellectual capacity that was different from dance movement and sustained rhythm. So sustained rhythm was seen as inferior and intellectual understanding was seen as superior. So it's a really big question, but what I found in the singing village is that people are freer to explore beyond these dynamics of power. So I was saying before, this goes across the board. The people who were disabled musically at some point in life by a teacher or somebody who said, "Oh, you cannot do this, you are not good enough, you cannot sing, you don't have sense of rhythm, you have a bad voice, you are out of tune," can participate in the singing village, uh, perhaps bringing something different or learning to join someone else or realizing that there are ways of collaborating that don't require for them to be better musicians in the conventional way. But what they will need to grow uh, inevitably is relationality. So
Mm-hmm.
the value is more in learning how can I drop my ideas about myself or what music is and relate with someone else. And the same with the people who consider themselves as being very evolved and very advanced, and perhaps have the pressure to come up with good ideas or sound good. And in a way, after a while, in the environment of the singing village, they might begin to soften some of that pressure to demonstrate and to show, and begin to realize that in softening that, they can discover other ways to collaborate and to relate. So the main note of the singing village is to invite people to be aware of what's happening, who am I being in this moment, and how are we collaborating and creating together, rather than what I am, what do I think I am, what do I think people want to see. So uh, I feel it's connected with the big story of power, but it's most importantly connected with self-awareness and how we can free ourselves from these tropes of domination that make people feel superior or inferior and lock them there, and then come in a place where we can dance together.
Hmm. Yeah, to me, it's a softening of this, and the relationality, the healthy relationality, is kind of shown through the sonic element, right? Of how connected also the music is in the whole space, and then our perception to these notions changes completely. It's not that it's suspended, but I think the coexistence in that way definitely then impacts the way we relate outside, right? Outside of these spaces, they're more so musical.
Yes, absolutely. So in the singing village, nothing is excluded. No type of music is excluded. Uh, we work without using language most of the time. Sometimes words can creep in the form of some storytelling or something that is shared, but most of the time I invite people to abandon literal language and to speak in some form of invented language where the expression is more important than the actual literal meaning of what's being discussed. And then I tend to use prompts which are, I hope, very overarching and very universal. So talking about different landscapes or different times in the cycle of nature and the seasons, or some of the archetypal ages of life, the child, the young person, the grown up, the elderly, that bring people away to find points of relationality and let the music emerge from those points, and let it emerge in a way that they don't need to try so hard, but that the people who feel inclined to can bring the invitations, and they are not better and not worse than the ones who respond to the invitations. And then some people will respond to the invitations as they feel in different ways. Some will amplify the invitations, some will sit in a supporting layer. Some people can even become part of the landscape where the music occurs, and that liberates them from singing. Some people can add movement without adding voice. So I feel that in the multiplicity of invitations and possibilities, anyone can join as they are, and people feel less pressurized to create something complex, ever changing. This is some of the other ideas we had about improvisation. It needs to be amazing, it needs to be complex all the time and have many layers. So I I love to bring back the value of simplicity, the value of convergence, and the value of silence. Those are three of my main
Hmm.
values. And
Yeah.
then probably the other one is invitation, which means a gift to the collective from the individual, which is being informed by the collective. And that's where that gifts come from.
Hmm. And this way of facilitating also might not be so easy at the beginning, right? It could be perceived as giving a lot of agency out to the room. It might be perceived as really letting go of certain notions of what it means to hold the space. So I wonder also as a trainer, what have you found that was helpful in this journey if someone wants to, invite people to make music in this way or relate in this way? What are
Um,
some of the steps or skills that they would need?
so my experience, and I don't want to generalize, but my experience is that a lot of the time people experience a certain degree of disorientation with these propositions. It can last for one breath or for a couple of minutes. And then something in them goes like, ah, but I can relax into this and it feels quite nice, even though I don't understand and I'm not even sure about it, but I can relax into it. So when I work with facilitators, sometimes I take people through this process so that they can feel in themselves that uncertainty and welcome it and begin from there. And I believe that once somebody who might have a lot of experience feels that moment of, "Ooh, what is this?" and then a bodily sensation of acceptance, comfort, being connected with others, that can be transmitted when they facilitate. So you can only facilitate what you live in yourself. And I also make a couple of invitations which I feel can help. One is to go along with it and not ask many questions if possible. And the other one is uh, to suit yourself. And if something doesn't feel comfortable, to very gently take a step back, but still be present with what's happening. So I feel it's not that I give. In these environments, people can have the agency to how much or how little they engage. And if you, as a facilitator, offer people that possibility, uh, then things really unfold by themselves because people will enter the game in their own time, in their own way, and not be forced to act in any way. I recently did something in Milan for a group of facilitators, and the first 5 minutes, everybody wanted instructions from me, and they were puzzled because I was throwing this pom pom around the room and inviting them to sing. I'm like, well, what do we do? I'm like, well, let's find out together. So, um, it's still big work in progress for me to let go of that and to be comfortable in that uncertainty. Mm. I'm beginning
Yeah.
to love it.
I think for sure. And also, maybe a lot of it is down on modeling and just saying it through music and through the body rather
Oh,
than
yes. And I
right.
think when you say modeling, there's something else, which is, yes, my enthusiasm, my, vocal engagement, my full body invitation to live it, but also increasingly my willingness to fall apart, to be vulnerable, or to be really silly and the fool, the clown. the first one to make people laugh, because that also liberates others in different ways.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Towards the end of these conversations, we like to kind of dream big and think also of this emergent global community. You're one of the founding members of the WELL. We've been, for instance, working a lot on resources, toolkits for this kind of work, trying to figure out what could be useful or what some of the next steps are. For me, for instance, when I think of the Singing Village, I think of the research I'm doing here in Slovenia, which is based on my cultural background, and how the more I dig into some ways that have existed here of people singing together, that's the first thing that I then link to these improvised spaces. And to me, it fits perfectly there as this additional layer of knowledge. So if you have these larger archetypes, what are the local archetypes that you can bring in each of the singing villages? It's a very broad question. We'll see where we go with it. But in thinking of the community that we're talking to and the tools that we're developing, do you have any kind of wishes or any dreams that can be as big as you want them to express?
Hmm. I wish for all the current forms of inviting people to sing spontaneously to coexist more and to be less separated in boxes and drawers.
Mm.
Uh, that doesn't mean that everything will be mixed, but that there will be informing each other, and there's going to be moments of commonality and exchange. Uh, Recently, my experience in Italy was a bit of that, that what I brought was of a different nature to some of the other offerings, and yet uh, it added an ingredient, and people really loved that juxtaposition. So uh, I hope more people can learn from each other. More and more people will keep traveling and learning from each other and finding different styles of offering this, because the collective pooling of all of this can have a really big impact in the local communities. I feel if each person comes with their history, their ancestry, their relationship to the local place, we come together somehow and we mix in this pool of collective creativity, collective intelligence, and then they go back after having been immersed in that pool, they go back informed by that into their own worlds. That's my wish. That would be a really beautiful exchange of gifts, and I feel that's what the well is, and that's why I was so passionate to be part of it and its creation. It's like this pool where people can come together and exchange not just information but experiences, feelings, music, ways of facilitating, ways of creating.
Yeah, and maybe that also relates to Anthropos, Songs of Humanity, an ensemble that we're a part of that we didn't get to talk about, but we can, but it's this kind of representation of that, maybe sometimes mostly in sound form, albums, or a performance, or on quote
Oof.
unquote stage, you
I mean,
know.
Anthropos is a dream come true, because going in front of a group of people and not presenting a show, but creating a happening together with the collaboration of each person who is sitting there is something I dreamed all my life. And I am very interested in expanding the idea we have of the artist, the musician performing for an audience, and instead this experience of musicians sharing music with the audience, and the audience being part of that creation and it being a co-creative process. So I'm glad I have three very creative and daring and quite adventurous beings, one being you, one being Kate Smith, one being Sylvia Schmidt, who are on board this experiment of making music in the moment and sharing it in this way, and including everyone who is present in the room, and perhaps also in our imagination, including more people in the world, more people who came before us.
Hmm. And when we're talking about these exchanges, to you, what makes them meaningful? If we're traveling around and really wanting to connect and share our practice, what kind of you know, hmm, how to make them like more fruitful in this day and age of, digital
Oh, okay.
noise and all the rest that's going on. Like, how can
So,
people maybe, even through the well, they have the map, they see all the points on the map, but what do we now do with these points, on the map and this variety of offerings?
well, I think in terms of the well and the points in the map is for me now every time I go somewhere, I will check the map and see who is there doing what, and can I go and say hello to them and sing with them. And if I think of my travels and how much I learned meeting people spontaneously and singing with them, uh, I one thing that we are developing with Anthropos is another dream, which is this possibility of coming to a community where there are some singers that are very steeped in a tradition and creating an interchange with them, an interchange where we could learn some of that tradition so that we can be live it and sound it and understand how it is made, and then perhaps where we can live some of our ways of working and collaborating that might open up how they can include more spontaneous forms of singing into that tradition and make it more breathable in different ways. So I'm very interested in this process of coming and going and what we can bring from spontaneous singing into a tradition and what the tradition can bring to us. And I would dream for everyone who is in the world at some point to meet someone else in person or virtually and sing with them and be enriched by that exchange.
Hmm. And a lot
So,
of the times we also talk about that as a cultural tool, right? Of collective singing, spontaneous singing, or vocal improvisation as a cultural tool that is there to be used, and it can do certain things as we are, exchanging with others and singing and creating.
oh, well, that's another huge conversation, but it's a really lovely note to end this one, which is uh, there's a lot of research now about music being a cultural tool, as you say, or I don't know,
Technology.
a technology of being, a technology
Mhm.
of community, a way to connect people. But I feel that the spontaneous music has an extra level of connectivity, and the spontaneous vocal music that includes voice, resonance, body, and rhythm has even an extra uh, layer of connectivity. So, what I hope for the well is for it to become an amplifying chamber for the expansion of spontaneous music that comes from the voice and the body and is shared in community so that more people can enjoy it and perhaps begin to utilize it. Is not a nice word, it feels a bit takey, but begin to experiment with it as a way to create community and to
Yeah.
maintain community.
And we talk a lot about weaving, so kind of weaving it into their lives and their practices. It always is a strong reminder of you
Yes,
and the way you talk about music as a tapestry as well.
yes.
There's so much that we could talk to. We could go on for hours as we usually do, but I think this was a really lovely introduction. Thank you for being here, and maybe just anything else that you want to share to the community about not necessarily upcoming events, but where can they find you, connect with you, or
Um,
find resources about your work.
well, please find me in social media or find my website. You just need to know how to spell my name and my
Which
long
will be in the
surname.
description,
Will be
so
in the
it will be
description,
there.
so you'll find it there. Uh, Please reach out to me, ask me questions if there's anything that you are curious about and you would like to discuss. I'm happy to organize a conversation. In the website, there's also a blog with some writings. There is some more writing and more tools and reflections that are going to come out quite soon. And uh, you can find me in London, but I also love traveling and bringing my work to your communities, to your existing ensembles. So I'm happy to talk about that and the possibility to go and work with you wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. And as always, with all these tools, we try to update them on the Wells website, like your latest video course. So have a go, have an explore, get in touch. Guillermo, thank you so much for today.
Thank you,
Sounds
Yaka.
like
That was very lovely to talk together.
Can't wait to sing again soon now that we live in two different countries.
Yeah,
But all the best till next time.
yeah.
And thank you for joining in conversation.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.